Hello, and welcome to the Oregon Business Matters podcast, brought to you by Oregon Business and Industry, our statewide chamber of commerce. At Oregon Business Matters, we focus on insights, issues, and initiatives that impact Oregonians' shared prosperity and the state's economic health. I'm Angela Wilhelms, President and CEO of OBI, and your host here at Oregon Business Matters. And today I am in the beautiful Santiam Canyon talking with Tyler Freres, Vice President of Sales at Freres Engineered Wood. The company has provided timber products and, importantly, jobs in Oregon for a very long time. It was founded over 100 years ago in 1922 as Freres Lumber and continues to be owned and operated by the Freres family. It manufactures several products at its facilities in Lyons and Mill City, including Mass Ply, a mass timber product that actually won OBI's inaugural Coolest Thing Made in Oregon contest 2 years ago. So Tyler, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I look forward to learning more.
Thank you, Angela. I really appreciate being here, and also appreciate the fact that we were awarded the Coolest Thing in Oregon. That was a very nice recognition.
Well, we'll come back to that. It's a fun competition, and it's underway right now. So we'll circle back to that and tell listeners how they can participate. Okay, well, first, Tyler, I have to ask a little bit. We moved out here to this cabin in Gates to do the conversation because your mills are very busy, and sometimes that means noisy. And so while they're being productive and going at it to work over there, we're here in this beautiful, picturesque setting. So I just want to ask you a little bit about why this place is so special to you, and if you could tell our listeners a little bit about where we are and what it means to you.
Sure. So Gates, Oregon is in the heart of the Santiam Canyon, and this property in particular was significantly impacted by the Beachy Creek fire in 2020. So most of the houses around this area were actually decimated during the Labor Day fires, and this property looked significantly different before. It was completely covered in 100-year-old trees that, since we're right along the river here, they were pretty much all decimated during the fires. So while the landscape is different, it still has a special place in our hearts. This was designed to be extremely fire resistant. So we have incorporated fire resistant insulation. We've used Mass Ply panels for all the entire structure of this building as well. So it's unique, and it's just a very special place.
Well, thank you. It is, driving through here, we were talking about this even before we started our conversation. It is remarkable to look at the landscape and to think about how those landscapes change over time, but how so quickly they can change so dramatically. And so I think it's beautiful what you're doing here to kind of respect and honor where we are and what this place has been, but also help move it forward and move the community forward. So let's talk about the company a little bit now. So Freres Engineered Wood began, as I said, over 100 years ago as Freres Lumber. A lot's changed in the 100 years that the company's been in operation, but can you give our listeners first just a quick company history?
Sure. As you mentioned, we began in 1922 with our grandfather, T.G. Freres, was the founder of the company. We like to say that innovation is our tradition, that we've constantly evolved over the last 100 years, and we're continuously looking to understand how to make wood products better and to capture additional markets out in the universe. So back in the mid-'50s, we moved to our current location, back when you could actually bring the trees to the mill as opposed to the mill to the trees. So at that time we were making lumber products, but after World War II we began making veneer products because we could realize additional fiber recovery from what you would typically see with lumber-based products. And as the GIs were coming back from the war, plywood was starting to come into better usage and created more efficient housing. So we jumped into that marketplace. We also were producing engineered veneers for LVL customers when LVL started being produced in the late 80s and the early 90s. So we transitioned pretty quickly into that type of engineered wood product. We bought our plywood facility out of bankruptcy in 1998, so that was our first touch with the end consumer, creating commodity-grade plywood for the marketplace. In the mid-2000s, we put in our cogen facility so we can produce about 7.2 megawatts after our heat usage. That's enough to really power about 5,000 homes, or another way to put it is we actually create more electricity out of wood waste than we consume as a company. In addition, about 50% of that wood waste is actually urban wood waste, so not even generated through our facilities. So we provide a public good as well, creating electricity out of what would otherwise be landfill material. So the electricity production also provides a lot of stability for the grid and allows us to offset some of the costs of energy production. So then in about 2015, we were feeling quite a bit of pressure from imported wood products with the reduction in timber supply in the Pacific Northwest, and particularly in Oregon, from the federal lands. Since they control about 60% of the overall landscape here in Oregon, and we've only seen a continual reduction in supply off of federal land and off of state land. The log costs are extremely high, so it makes it very difficult for us to compete against foreign wood producers. And it doesn't seem like U.S. consumers have any allegiance to American-made products at that period of time. I hope that's changing a little bit. But we were looking for a value-added product that we could make in order to stay competitive. And we looked at cross-laminated timber, which is a lumber-based mass timber panel that most people were trying to produce as a new product entry to try and offset concrete and steel construction for all different building types. And we felt like we could make a better product. So at that period of time, we went into development of our veneer-based mass timber product. And to this day, we think it's the best mass timber product available in the marketplace. It's denser, has more structural capacity, has very consistent low moisture content, so it makes your buildings very stable. And to date, we've been involved in almost every single building type out there, from multi-story, 19-story buildings, all wood. We've done warehouses. We're getting much more into the industrial and distribution space. And we've also done some very aesthetic projects out there too. So we've got a pretty decent portfolio now that I'm pretty proud of, and I see a really good future ahead of us for that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's so fascinating to think of a company like this and how the technology has changed over time, and how you guys have adapted to that and helped drive some of that change by looking at opportunities, whether it's the opportunities that demand and population growth can provide when you talk about housing needed after World War II, but also then the flip side, the competitive pressures. And I think I'm going to get on my little soapbox here for just 1 second, but I think this is something too few people understand about business. At the end of the day, businesses are problem solvers. They're innovators, and you're solving problems for customers, clients, whatever word you want to attach there. And it's so cool to see how a company can continue to evolve and grow, and all because it has an eye towards that continual problem solving and innovation. And it's also why we think the private sector is pretty good at helping the public sector think about how to solve bigger problems too, and why we wish maybe some people would lean into listening to those private sector innovators a little more. But I digress. That's what happens when they give me a microphone and a podcast. So you mentioned a couple, some of the variety of projects that Mass Ply has gone into, but I want you to unpack a couple of these projects a little more. If you could pick maybe 2 examples, because I think it's really fascinating and people don't quite yet see it in all of their communities because it's still an emerging technology and product. But like the 19-story building, for example, can you unpack that a little more and talk about really what makes it tick and what makes this an excellent product for that going forward?
Sure, that's a fantastic project, and really I can't talk about that project without first talking about the developer that's really taking the risk to do so. OWOW has been a fantastic development partner for this type of product, but you've got to understand that we're a very small portion of the structural the overall cost being we're the structural portion, but there's a whole lot of other elements to a very large building like this. So while let's say we might have $4 million worth of product in a building like that, they are spending $90 million on the overall building. So for them to take the leap of faith in order to use a new product to build an entire 19-story building is truly commendable. I think at the end of the day, what they experienced and what they proved out is that not only could we put up the building much faster, but actually create it with much more quality materials, create a better structure, and also doing it with a carbon sequestrating material that doesn't add to the global warming potential out there. So I think it's a win-win the entire way. They actually felt like they, by the end of the project, that they were able to reduce the construction cost by 30% compared to a typical concrete and steel construction. And they did that by really expediting the construction. So since all of our panels are prefabricated in the factory, they arrive on site and they're essentially bolted together in the overall construction time frame. So they had originally anticipated that they could put up a floor every 10 days. They ended up putting up a floor every 4 days. And we're moving forward with projects with them in the first quarter in which they feel like they can put up a floor every day. So that obviously leads to some production difficulties for us, is that we essentially have to pre-manufacture the entire building so that they could essentially put up the building as quickly as they can and hopefully reduce the cost of construction even more. So that's an extraordinary project, and I can't say enough about the OWOW development team.
No, that's great. It is, and I've been out to the facility and I've seen the panels being produced. It's a fascinating process, and it is. It's wild to see them and then think, oh, it's not. I mean, it's not a puzzle because that implies that it's somehow hard or complicated to put together. But it's all these pieces that are perfectly formed and ready to go, and then they just have to be assembled and integrated. And it's very cool to see. And it's very cool to see now those in these completed projects, and I'm glad you have more on the way. I want to talk about something else you mentioned in your company history and overview, and that's sustainability. I think also the timber industry in particular, but a lot of resources that are rooted in the use of natural resources, those industries are sometimes thought of as maybe not being focused on sustainability, and that's a completely wrong impression for people to have. In fact, you guys do dedicate a lot of time to thinking about sustainability. And like you said, the energy production and generation in lieu of waste. I mean, those are the types of things that you're doing. And I wonder if you could just opine a little more on kind of your company's thoughts and philosophy about sustainability and how that factors into the decisions you make as a company. And I know you can't speak for the whole industry, but to the extent you can extrapolate that for the industry, I think that would be helpful for people to hear.
Yeah, there are so many facets to sustainability. We look at the sustainability of the product as far as wood products have been used for tens of thousands of years to create housing and create affordable housing for people, back, from log homes to the current complicated design. But I think what we really have is an opportunity to use a material that takes less energy to produce, that doesn't have any bad effluent emissions that potentially you can have with concrete and steel, and we can really create buildings on equivalence with those materials now. So it allows people the direct comparison of wood versus concrete and steel, and say what is the most sustainable way that we have to build with. And trees are renewable. We can replant them. They're reusable. There are tons of examples of old buildings being reconfigured and reused with wood products. And they're solar powered. Trees grow much quicker than we give them credit for. And they can help create a more sustainable environment out there by breathing in more carbon dioxide and breathing out oxygen, and the entire time using sunlight to grow. So as far as a building material, I think wood is hands down the best. But sustainability also, of course, goes into the forest. And for our perspective, neglect is not forest management. Neglect is actually unsustainable. And I think what Oregon has seen over the last few years with the increase of wildfire danger is the outcome of 30 years of neglect. That we have essentially taken the standpoint that human intervention in all aspects is better than allowing humans to be the gardeners for our forest landscape. And so I would really like to emphasize that these forests are an opportunity for Oregon prosperity. They're an opportunity for prosperity for our rural community. Forest management is the opportunity to not only solve some of the budget issues that we have in this state, but it's also the opportunity to create a much more healthy forest landscape than we currently have. Our lands are overgrown. They've got too many trees per acre to support what we can, and we are creating the landscape that's more fire prone. So human intervention, our intervention, can not only end up with more prosperous rural communities, it can end up with healthier forests, better habitat, cleaner drinking water, and all that comes from just a little bit of human help, and that's what we really need to do.
Yeah, well said. So Oregon's timber industry has been through a lot in recent decades. Some would say it's struggled. I don't like to say it's struggled because I think the industry has done for itself the best it can. And you guys have persevered and innovated and remained committed to rural communities and those jobs and the products that you make and the health of the forests and all of that. But it's been difficult. Hardly a month goes by without news that a mill somewhere in the state has shut down. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about some of the challenges that the industry faces in Oregon, elsewhere in the Northwest as well, and what can be done from a policy standpoint to address those? I know that's a big question, so if you want to focus on a couple areas, I get that.
Yeah, I could definitely try to break that down a little bit. One, to recognize that the shutdown of mill infrastructure is a national problem and has been occurring for the last few years. There's a whole lot of macroeconomic issues that have developed. The U.S. dollar is actually very strong compared to its historical weight, and so foreign imports have been extremely cheap relative to U.S. producers, and historically the volume of timber that's been harvested nationwide has continued to shrink because the federal government is largely absent. So looking at Oregon specifically, historically, prior to the Northwest Forest Plan, there used to be about, let's call it 8 billion board feet that was harvested in Oregon, with the majority of that coming off of federal land, either Forest Service or Bureau of Land Management. But after the Northwest Forest Plan, that shifted so that most of the timber that is supplied off of private land. So federal government now provides only about 15% of the annual harvest. The majority comes off of private land held by either large corporations or private small family landowners. But what that's really done is increase the cost of fiber to the producers that are trying to sell product out into the marketplace. And it's really made us not cost competitive compared to imported wood products from all over the world. And most other countries look at wood as a renewable material that they can constantly, essentially churn in order to add to their employment and add to their prosperity. Instead, Oregon's made it more and more difficult to actually manage our lands. Most recently, the Habitat Conservation Plan has taken potentially 32% of the state harvest and reduced that as well. So we have seen no positive developments towards additional timber or fiber being offered in our state. So if you're a wood products company and you're looking at potentially investing in latest technology or trying to expand your production, this doesn't seem like the place to do it. Oregon has not offered us the business climate in which you can try and make large-scale investments and think that you can be profitable on it for the next 20 years. And wood products companies need that type of certainty. They need a 20-year certainty in order to make significant investments in their operations. So until Oregon's willing to provide us with that type of certainty that, yes, we are partners in creating a more prosperous Oregon, it's going to be very difficult for wood products companies to make the investment in their local communities.
So you mentioned the effect that the international market can have, not just in Oregon, but nationally on the industry. A conversation we have with businesses all the time this year is about tariffs and some of the uncertainty that unfolded at the beginning of the year. That uncertainty seems to be dying down, but now we're facing different industries are facing different new tariff structures, if you will. Can you talk a little bit from your perspective about the tariff policies and how those are or aren't, affecting you?
Yeah, this is a great subject, actually, because I in the short term, the tariff policy has been extremely difficult for us, primarily because of the on and off nature of the tariffs. So essentially what was granted was a 90-day reprieve on the tariff policies that were announced for imported wood products. And what that meant was a opportunity for foreign producers to fill up every single warehouse in the United States over the last 3 months and to completely take the oxygen out of any market that we had for our commodity wood products. So that has been extremely difficult. That said, on a longer term basis, I think the tariffs are going to provide us with an opportunity to equalize the markets. I personally don't see that there's going to be a massive increase in wood products pricing. I think what could really happen is that we might actually have the opportunity to run our facilities at full shifts and not be in the situation where we've got temporary layoffs or we're laying off of a shift, that we can actually run our facilities at full capacity and keep people employed on a more consistent basis. Because we're not there right now. We are taking rolling layoffs at times just due to the volumes of imports that are coming in. So going forward, I'm very supportive of the tariffs. We're 100% Oregon made and made in America as well. So we don't have significant cost increases from the fact that the tariffs are being levied. There are some foreign parts that we buy, but our fab shop guys and our maintenance mechanics are absolutely fantastic, and they're making their own parts now, so we can offset some of the potential imported product prices out there. So the other thing I would say about tariffs is that in Oregon and the United States, we have been on a continual, relentless movement towards overregulation. So whether or not that's environmental, or it's labor, or it's taxes, or anything else, at some point these regulations become so overbearing that domestic producers can't bear them anymore and still compete with countries that have no care about those issues, that don't care about the environment, that don't care how quickly they rotate a stand of trees, or how much they pollute the environment, or how they treat their employees, or bring up a list of the things that we choose on a social basis to impose as cost on our businesses. If the only way to equalize that playing field is by putting on a tariff, then we need to actually support our business, because we're really the ones that provide the economic engine for our state. And so far, we've been largely neglected.
Yeah, you talked about the ability to have your shifts operating, full steam, keeping your employees at the mills and coming to work and providing those good paying jobs. And that's something we're talking about a lot with policymakers right now as we see private sector job declines in the state. The fastest way to lift people into prosperity is a good job. The fastest way to help the state address the problems that it has is a robust economy, which is predicated on good jobs. And you can tell, I think, when I visit your facility and when we're talking today, you can hear how much those employees matter to you, and how much of a role they play in the company's success and how much you guys respect that. Can you talk a little bit about those employees and importantly, beyond just them as individuals, the community culture that Freres really tries to embody, and the support that you want to be able to put back into the community and that ecosystem economically?
To start from a charitable perspective, the Freres Foundation was established, a long time ago, but essentially we do direct charitable contributions of over $250,000 annually through the Freres Foundation, all specifically targeted at needs within the Santiam Canyon is what we really prioritize. So, we lead with our charity. We focus on the rural community, but to your point, there is no substitute for true productive capacity and prosperity within these rural communities. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the beginning of the timber wars and the implementation of the Northwest Forest Plan. I remember the prosperity that we experienced in the rural communities during that period of time, where we are harvesting more timber and we provided more opportunities to our rural communities. That's what I would really like to see, is the opportunity for us to run full steam, for us to hire more people, to invest in robotics, to invest in the latest technologies, not so we can reduce our headcount, but so we can make these jobs much more rewarding and much more prosperous for the people that we employ. We're not a minimum wage job. We essentially start at over $21 an hour for our entry level positions, and we're still short of people. So at some point, if you're still short of people, you need to be able to come up with your same production levels that you've had in the past. I think that right now, I can't tell people how much it hurts to cut shifts or to reduce hours, and I know how difficult that is for people on an hourly wage when they're not getting what they fully anticipate on a weekly basis, and it puts a hole in their weekly budgets. And we want the opportunity to run hard. Instead, what we're seeing is hundreds of truckloads of veneer coming down from Canada on a weekly basis that is essentially cheaper because of the raw material, because Oregon's not making that fiber available to us. We want the opportunity to add more prosperity to our rural communities, and the trees and the fiber are the best way to get there.
That's great. Well, we could probably talk all day about a whole host of specific issues or the bounty and beauty of where we're at and what it can mean for economic prosperity, but we've also promised our listeners that these weren't going to be super long episodes. So we'll get close to wrapping it up, but before we close out, I just wanted to ask if there was anything else that we haven't touched on that you really want to make sure our listeners know about the company, about the family, about the work that you do. Anything top of mind before we close out?
Well, I think I don't think we'd close out the conversation without at least bringing up the Portland Airport, because that is kind of a monumental achievement, and I've got to hand it to the entire Hoffman-Skanska team that put that together, as well as our partners with Swinnerton and Timber Lab that helped do that project. It is one of the finest welcoming signs to Oregon, and I think it shows that Oregon has opportunity, and we can do this if given the opportunity. So we are very proud of the fact that we did the entire airport roof. We did a whole bunch of decorative elements from the skylights and also around the HVAC systems in order to give it that type of engineered wood look. And it's going to be a project that's welcoming to people coming to Oregon for a very long period of time. And one thing I would really like to recognize about that is that the largest majority of that wood came from salvage from the forest fires in 2020. And I don't understand why that's a complicated issue for people. When I drive down Highway 22 and I still see standing dead trees, it makes me sad. When it's the Scotch broom blooming season and our hills are on fire with yellow, because we've decided that we're not going to harvest that, or not going to salvage that material and turn it to beneficial use. Instead, we're going to let it rot on our hillsides and encourage invasive species. That makes me really sad. We need to expect a lot more of our state, and we need to expect a lot more of our federal government for the management of these forests. So we've got a renewable material going into the future. And I think that the Portland Airport could be the first example that people see for what sustainable management looks like.
I'm so glad you brought up that project, and I'm embarrassed I didn't do it myself earlier, but kudos to you and all the companies that were a part of that. It is gorgeous. It is a symbol in so many ways, and I think what you said about making sure that we think differently as in a policy-making sense about how we manage responsibly, but utilize this extraordinary benefit we have at our fingertips. I think it's negligent not to, both economically and frankly environmentally. So I'm glad you brought that up. I do want to circle back really quick to the Coolest Thing Made in Oregon competition before we leave. Again, congrats to Freres for winning that inaugural competition. About the time this episode runs, we'll be closing out the 2025 competition. But I want to encourage everyone listening to start brainstorming now, because we'll be opening that competition again in 2026, and you can nominate any Oregon manufactured product for that bracket style competition. People aren't familiar with it, they should go to OregonBusinessIndustry.com and you can find the Coolest Thing Made in Oregon competition there. But it's great. We're very proud that Freres won. Epic Aircraft was number 2, and I don't yet know who our third winner will be, but we're excited for them as well. So thank you, Tyler Freres, for joining us today. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Oregon Business Matters. It's a production of Oregon Business and Industry, your statewide chamber of commerce, and our episodes can be found on all of the top podcast platforms. And again, for more info about this episode or anything else OBI is working on, visit OregonBusinessIndustry.com. Thank you very much.